Snow fell like static from a broken transmission, whispering across the metallic hull of Elias Varen's crawler. The vehicle's engines coughed through the blizzard, their hum the only sign of life in a wasteland long abandoned by maps. He leaned over the dashboard, eyes half hidden behind cracked goggles, watching faint signals pulse on the scanner. The world here was nothing but white noise and ruin. Somewhere beneath the kilometers of frozen dust, something impossible was stirring, a frequency that didn't match any known spectrum. He had chased ghosts before. Broken satellites. Lost probes. The occasional myth wrapped in electromagnetic echoes. But this was different. The readings weren't mechanical, they breathed. Every pulse carried the faint signature of organic rhythm, like a heartbeat buried in the planet's core. He throttled forward. The storm thickened, gnawing at visibility, clawing at the crawler's shields. Static flooded his comms, then died completely. He was alone now, beyond even automated contact with orbit. Just him, the cold, and the pulse. When the signal spiked, his instruments screamed, feedback so loud it shattered his earpiece. A fissure opened in the snow ahead, swallowing light. Beneath the layer of ice, faint luminescent veins glowed blue, spreading outward in intricate geometric webs. They weren't natural formations. They looked like circuitry, ancient and alive. Elias parked the crawler on the edge of the abyss and stepped out, his boots crunching over the frozen crust. The air was sharp and electric, as if the planet itself had drawn breath after centuries of silence. He knelt, brushed away the frost, and saw it, an alloy unlike any human design, curved and seamless, half buried beneath the ice. He set up his plasma drill, fingers trembling from the cold. The metal wasn't resistant, it yielded, as though recognizing his touch. When the first panel came loose, a gust of warm air escaped, carrying the scent of ozone and something older, deeper. Like the breath of a sleeping storm. Lights flickered below. A tunnel descended into darkness, lined with smooth walls that pulsed with slow, organic light. Against every rule of reason, Elias descended. The deeper he went, the warmer it became. His breath stopped fogging. Frost gave way to mist, then to condensation. The walls vibrated faintly, producing a sound low and mournful. It felt less like architecture and more like anatomy. He touched the wall, and it trembled beneath his glove, soft as muscle, firm as metal. The passage opened into a vast chamber, a cathedral of impossible scale. Suspended in its center were shapes so massive his mind struggled to define them, curved wings, scales glinting like fractured stars, claws the size of shuttles. Frozen mid-motion, encased in translucent fields of ice. They were dragons. His first instinct was disbelief, myth bleeding into madness. But the longer he looked, the clearer the truth became. The scales bore traces of synthetic grafts, filaments embedded along their spines. Tubes connected to dormant reactors at the base of the chamber. They weren't creatures born, they were engineered. War machines carved from flesh and code. His scanner confirmed impossible readings, carbon structures integrated with plasma conduits, genetic material bonded with nanofibers. They were alive, but paused. Machines with heartbeats. He moved closer to one, the largest of them all, its wings folded inward like a collapsed storm front. Its eyes were closed, lids etched with runes that seemed to shimmer faintly beneath the ice. Elias raised his hand, unsure why. His fingers brushed the barrier, and the world vanished. For a fraction of a heartbeat, his mind was flooded with images. A burning sky. Armies of silver ships. Fire sweeping across planets. The sensation of falling, of endless sleep, of chains wrapped around the soul. He gasped and stumbled back, tearing his glove free. The ice cracked. A sound filled the chamber. Not through air, but through thought. A whisper. Help us. He froze, staring at the dragon's closed eyes. The voice came again, softer, layered with something ancient and broken. Help us, before we end. The scanners went wild. The energy signature surged, spreading from the core of the creature outward. The ice glowed, fracturing with spiderweb lines of light. Elias's pulse matched its rhythm. Instinct screamed at him to run. Curiosity anchored his feet. He activated his recording module, speaking aloud though the words trembled. Unknown biosynthetic entity. Cryogenic stasis. Possible intelligence, communication detected. His own voice sounded unreal in the vast silence. Requesting identification. No answer. Only a hum that resonated deep in his bones. The creature's chest rose slightly, as if struggling for air. The temperature in the chamber climbed. The tunnels above shook, dislodging snow in faint avalanches. Whatever containment field had held them was failing. Elias looked around. There were dozens of them, each beginning to glow with faint, golden light. The pulse from their combined awakening harmonized, forming a low, thrumming tone that vibrated through the ground. He didn't know what he had done. He didn't know if this place had been meant to be found. But as the walls lit up in cascading waves, and symbols long dead flared back to life, he felt the distinct, terrifying awareness of being seen. Not just by the creature before him, but by something collective. Ancient. Sentient. Then the voice came again, this time filling every corner of the vault, a chorus of overlapping minds speaking through him rather than to him. We are dying. The engines that bind us fail. Will you mend us, human? He couldn't speak. His throat was dry, his thoughts scattered. They weren't machines begging for repair, they were prisoners begging for release. Still, his instinct as a mechanic answered before his fear did. I'll try. The dragon's eyes remained closed, but the chamber brightened, as if acknowledging a pact. The heartbeat beneath the floor synchronized with his own. And for the first time in his life, Elias Varon realized that the universe's oldest stories hadn't been myths at all, they had been warnings. The storm had buried his crawler by the time Elias returned to the surface, his breath burning in his throat from the climb. The world above seemed distant now, unreal, a sheet of static compared to the pulsing silence beneath. He sealed the hatch and collapsed inside, shaking, replaying the memory of that voice. Every rational thought insisted it had been an auditory hallucination, some kind of neurofeedback from exposure to alien frequencies. But the ice had moved. The walls had breathed. And the signal was still pulsing through his scanner, rhythmic and alive. He uploaded the data logs to his onboard terminal. The readings defied physics, massive biological energy signatures coexisting with deep core reactors that hadn't degraded in over 30,000 years. Whoever had built them hadn't just known bioengineering, they had mastered it. The fusion of living matter and technology was beyond anything human science had achieved. He enlarged the data map. The entire valley was an organic circuit, a buried organism spanning kilometers, using crystalline formations as neural conduits. The dragons weren't lying dormant in a tomb. They were part of a living network. Elias stared at the hologram, unease crawling beneath his skin. The voice had said engines. Engines that bind. Were the dragons the engines themselves, or vessels powered by something deeper? He zoomed in on the central node, the chamber he'd discovered. At its core, a glowing pulse matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. His own heart mirrored it involuntarily, as though the signal had already linked to him. He muttered to himself, trying to ground his thoughts. You found something alive, Elias. Not a ruin. A system. He retrieved his exosuit, powered up his portable fusion torch, and descended again. The tunnel recognized his biometric signature this time. The lights along the walls flickered to life in a sequence, guiding his descent like veins illuminating toward a heart. When he reached the central chamber, the ice around the dragons had grown thinner. Vapor coiled upward like breath from sleeping giants. The air was dense, humming with potential. He knelt beside the largest dragon, the one that had spoken. Its metallic implants now glowed faintly, and energy readings spiked with each passing second. He could see the conduits embedded beneath the scales, lattices of synthetic muscle woven with superconductive filaments. He connected his tool module to one of the exposed junctions. The interface responded immediately, translating ancient glyphs into a language his visor could parse. Life engine status, 3% functionality. Genetic control protocol active. The line below pulsed, demanding input. He hesitated, realizing he could send commands directly into the system. Control protocol, he murmured. Genetic control, they're enslaved by code. His gloves trembled as he scrolled through layers of encrypted commands. Each one was written not in programming syntax, but in molecular sequences, commands for living DNA. It wasn't just machinery he was dealing with. It was life rewritten to obey. His stomach twisted. The realization settled like lead in his mind: the dragons weren't weapons because they wanted to be. They were built that way. Their obedience wasn't choice, it was design. Whoever had made them had carved servitude into their genes. And now those masters were gone, leaving behind creatures that couldn't die, couldn't wake, and couldn't disobey. "Help us," the voice whispered again, not in sound but as a thought, threading through the edges of his mind. It wasn't coming from one dragon. It was a chorus, a collective mind reaching through the decay. He steadied himself, tightening his neural link. "I need access to your systems," he said aloud, unsure if they could understand speech or only thought. The chamber responded by shifting temperature. A light pattern spread along the floor, an interface of glowing symbols. When he touched one, pain shot through his skull, sharp and blinding. His consciousness was pulled inward, spiraling into a network of images and sensations. He stood not in the cavern but in a vision of another world. Metallic citadels pierced the clouds, their towers wrapped in organic growth. Armies of dragons soared across alien skies, their wings cutting through fleets of starships. And at the heart of it all were figures, humanoid, tall, adorned with flowing metallic robes. They held control rods pulsing with the same light as the dragon's implants. "We were born for war," the voice said. "Bound to their command. Our fire burned worlds. When the makers fell, they sealed us here, between life and oblivion. Our engines decay. Soon, we will dissolve into nothing." Elias felt the weight of their centuries pressing against his mind, guilt, fury, the desperate ache of beings created for violence but dreaming of peace. "If I restart your engines," he said within the vision, "you'll survive. We will survive. But the code will bind us again. You will repair our chains." He broke the connection with a cry, collapsing to the floor. His visor flickered with static. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. "They want to live," he whispered. "But the repair keeps them enslaved." His mind raced. The maker's code was beyond him, but patterns emerged within the data, genetic lock sequences disguised as maintenance subroutines. He could repair the engines and rewrite those locks at the same time. He could free them. But he wasn't sure what freeing them meant. These were not machines. They were beings of immeasurable power. His rational mind warned him that unshackled, they could level continents. Yet the memory of their sorrow, the centuries of silence, gnawed at him. He activated his neural console, linking it to the core interface. The system accepted his connection as if it had been waiting for him. Lines of alien code unfurled like galaxies across his visor. He began rewriting the first sequence, adjusting the molecular bindings, breaking the obedience triggers. The console resisted, pulsing red, fighting back with defensive loops. He overrode them one by one, sweat pooling inside his collar. Then, the system spoke, not through the dragons, but directly, a cold synthetic voice older than humanity. Unauthorized genetic access. Identity, human. Warning, revocation of Creator's covenant will result in systemic awakening. He ignored it, pushing through. The chamber grew brighter, the dragon's hearts pulsing faster. The hum became a roar beneath his feet. His tools melted from the energy surge, but he kept his neural link stable. One last command, one final sequence, release all control. The air exploded with light. Energy spiraled upward in golden torrents, wrapping around the dragons like solar flares. Elias shielded his eyes as the ice shattered completely, revealing vast, beating wings and molten eyes staring into his soul. The neural link overloaded, flooding his mind with their awakening cry, an untranslatable emotion between pain and liberation. When the glow faded, silence fell again, heavy and infinite. The dragons did not move. But their eyes, thousands of them, were open now. And every one of them was looking at him. The silence that followed their awakening was a sound Elias would never forget, too vast to be quiet, too alive to be peaceful. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the skull, dense with breathless power. Every dragon's eye shimmered with that molten light, gold and living, their gaze neither hostile nor grateful, but aware. The temperature rose until frost melted from the walls, streaming down in rivulets that hissed as they touched the glowing floor. Elias's visor fogged, his neural link sizzled and then went dark. He tore the connection cable from his temple, the taste of metal thick on his tongue. The largest dragon, Viserys, the one who had spoken first, shifted slightly, the smallest movement sending tremors through the chamber. The ground cracked under its talons. Its wings remained folded, but even still, the sheer scale of it eclipsed everything else in the room. A voice, deep as tectonic movement, rippled through the air and through Elias's mind at once. You broke the code. Elias swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. You were dying. You freed us, Viserys said, the tone unreadable, ancient and resonant. You have done what even our makers feared. The other dragons stirred, their scales refracting light like fractured mirrors. Some hissed softly, not in aggression but confusion, as if rediscovering their own lungs after eternity. Elias backed toward the nearest console, scanning the readings. The life engine metrics were stabilizing, no longer failing but reorganizing themselves into new structures, organic feedback loops replacing the rigid genetic commands he had erased. The system was rebuilding itself, adapting, alive. You're healing, he said, his voice small against the cavern's enormity. You'll live. Viserys lowered its massive head, the glow in its eyes dimming to an ember. Life and freedom are not the same, human. The last time we were free, worlds burned. The words cut through him. Images from his earlier vision flashed in fragments, dragons raining plasma fire over alien cities, their wings slicing through orbiting fleets, their cries shaking atmospheres. He had thought them victims. Now he wondered if he had just revived a weaponized species built for extinction. Before he could speak again, the chamber's outer sensors activated, flickering with bursts of static. Human code scrolled briefly across his display. A satellite ping. Then another. A third. Someone was watching. The power surge from the dragon's revival had breached the electromagnetic storm that once concealed this place. Human orbit was listening. Elias's heart sank. Your awakening's been detected, he said. The outer world knows. Viserys' gaze turned upward, as though seeing beyond rock and storm, into the void above. They will come, the dragon murmured. They always come for what they do not understand. Elias's terminal beeped. Incoming transmission, scrambled, distorted, but unmistakably human. He hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice broke through the interference. This is Commander Rhea Eisen, Orbital Survey Command. Unidentified transmission source, identify yourself. You've triggered a planetary anomaly beacon. This is Elias Varen, he replied, forcing steadiness into his tone. Independent mechanic. I've discovered something beneath the ice. It's alive. Static. Then, alive. Repeat that. You wouldn't believe me if I did. Her voice turned sharp. We've tracked a megawatt surge from your coordinates. Is this a weapon? A bioweapon site? We have authorization to neutralize unknown threats. Elias froze. Don't. But Viserys had already heard. The dragon's body glowed faintly, luminous veins crawling along its neck and chest. The air around Elias vibrated. They speak of destruction before understanding. It has not changed. Please, Elias said aloud, his voice cracking. They'll see you as enemies. They'll do what they always do, Viserys finished. And we will remember how to fight. The chamber brightened again as power flowed through the conduits, energizing every dormant structure. The dragons rose, one by one, the sound of their movement like thunder trapped beneath stone. Elias stumbled back, shielding his eyes as luminous plasma rippled along their wings. On the surface, seismic alarms blared in his crawler. The ice cracked open across kilometers, geysers of vapor exploding skyward. From orbit, it must have looked like the planet itself was waking. The transmission line filled with shouting voices. Anomaly escalating. Multiple signatures. God, they're moving, what is that? Then silence. When Elias dared to look again, Viserys' wings unfurled fully for the first time, stretching into the vault ceiling. The structure above responded, panels shifting and peeling away like petals, revealing the gray light of the storm. Snow and wind howled into the cavern. The dragon's scales caught the light, burning gold and crimson. You can't go up there, Elias shouted, though the wind ripped the words away. They'll see you. They'll attack. Viserys looked down at him, eyes glowing like twin suns. They already have. And then, impossibly, the dragon took flight. The rush of displaced air threw Elias to the floor as Viserys broke through the ceiling, a burst of radiant heat following in its wake. One after another, the others followed, wings cutting through ice and sky. The roar that filled the air was not merely sound, it was a harmonic vibration that shattered the storm itself. The cloud split, revealing the pale glow of orbiting stations far above. Elias staggered to his feet, staring upward through the widening breach. His comm erupted with warnings, target locks, incoming drones, command chatter in panic. Humanity had seen the myth reborn. He reached for his transmitter, voice shaking. Commander Ison, listen to me, don't engage them. They're sentient. They're not your enemy. Varen, what did you do? I set them free. There was no response, only the distant thunder of engines igniting in the sky. He looked up once more and saw Viserys hovering in the stormlight, wings vast enough to darken the valley. For a moment, the dragon seemed to watch him, no malice, only recognition. A silent promise of something inevitable. Then it turned toward the horizon, toward the orbiting lights above, and the roar that followed shook the world to its core. The world watched the sky burn. From orbit, the first satellite feed came in as a trembling blur of gold and ash, shapes rising from the ice fields like titans, wings outspread, vapor spiraling in their wake. Every station and surveillance node across the upper atmosphere froze its broadcast in disbelief. Commanders barked orders, algorithms calculated impossible trajectories, and automated defense grids stuttered between organic and mechanical classifications. None of them had a category for this. Elias Varen stood amid the wreckage of his crawler, wind ripping through the valley as the dragons ascended. The air vibrated with electromagnetic hums, resonant and painful, like the pulse of a planetary engine. He tried to raise the comm again, but the interference was total, even his neural implant was overloaded, fragments of static whispering like ghosts. Then, through the chaos, a faint tone pulsed in the back of his mind, a familiar frequency. The dragons were speaking again, not in words, but in the pattern of energy that surrounded him. You gave us freedom, human. Do you fear it now? He pressed a hand to his head, his thoughts dizzying. You're breaking the atmosphere, he shouted into the storm. If you don't stop, they'll think you're attacking. We are only breathing, the thought came, rippling with both sadness and wonder. The air tastes of silence and fear. Above, the dragons climbed higher. Their wings carved patterns in the clouds, each motion leaving behind contrails of plasma that glimmered like auroras. They were too beautiful, too vast to be mistaken for anything human, and that beauty was their threat. Orbital sensors locked on. Defense satellites armed. In the command bridge of the orbital platform Erebus, Commander Rhea Eisen watched the feeds in disbelief. "Confirm those energy readings," she ordered. "We're detecting multiple fusion outputs but, biological. That can't be right." Her technicians stammered, trying to explain what their instruments refused to define. The dragon's heat signatures matched plasma reactors, yet their movement was organic, deliberate, almost graceful. "They're alive," one of the younger officers whispered. "Commander, whatever those are, they're alive." "Alive or not," Eisen replied, "if they reach the stratosphere, they'll destabilize the orbit network." She hesitated, fingers hovering over the authorization key. "Target the largest one. Low yield. I want them warned, not destroyed." 1,000 kilometers below, Elias watched the contrail of the first missile cut through the horizon. His heart stopped. No, 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 he ran across the shattered valley, stumbling over melted ice. The dragons turned in unison, their golden eyes catching the descending flame. The missile struck nothing, it disintegrated midair, dissolved in a burst of light that never reached the ground. Vieiris hovered above the valley, its wings folded in a slow, deliberate motion. "They strike us from the heavens," the dragon's voice thundered in Elias's mind, this time tinged with restrained fury. "Their fire is small. Shall we remind them what true fire is?" "Please," Elias cried, his voice hoarse, "they don't understand what you are. You don't need to fight, just talk to them." Vieiris lowered its massive head, eyes flickering. "Talk. The Makers never listened. The destroyers of skies speak only through weapons." "I'm not asking for them," he said, chest heaving. "I'm asking for me." For a moment, the dragon paused. The vast swarm above, thousands of wings slicing through stormlight, seemed to hold still. The roar faded, leaving only the sigh of the wind. Then Vieiris turned toward the sky again. "We will not burn them. But they must see." A beam of light erupted from the dragon's chest, no explosion, no weapon, just pure radiance. It expanded through the clouds, bending the air like liquid glass. The storm vanished. The satellites above were blinded for 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, every screen across orbit filled with the same image, a dragon's eye. A golden, living eye, vast as a continent, looking directly into every lens. Then the signal resolved into a transmission, an ancient frequency wrapped in Elias's voice. "This is not an attack. They are sentient. They are free. Don't make humanity's first contact another war." The words echoed across channels before being cut by static. Eisen stood frozen at her console, her hand trembling over the abort command. "Play back that audio." "Who authorized?" "Commander," one of her crew interrupted, "the transmission didn't come from our relay. It came from them. They're transmitting through their own electromagnetic fields." The realization sank into the bridge like gravity. The dragons were using their own bioenergy as communication relays. They weren't just intelligent, they were a civilization reawakening. Down below, Elias watched as Vieiris and the others rose beyond the clouds. The pressure change made his ears pop, the snow around him had melted into rivers of steam. The valley trembled again, not from destruction, but rebirth. The ice was giving way to ancient ground that had not seen light in eons. Beneath it, faint structures shimmered. Massive pylons of living crystal, spreading outward in concentric rings. The dragon's vault wasn't just a prison. It was a launch cradle. He realized, with both awe and dread, what was happening. They weren't simply escaping Earth's sky. They were calling home. In orbit, alarms howled. Unidentified energy surge, planetary resonance spike, space-time distortion forming in the upper atmosphere. On the surface, the air shimmered like heat above asphalt. Elias looked up and saw the first tear in the sky, a wound of light bending outward, forming a spiral that reached into the void. The dragons encircled it, their wings generating harmonic frequencies that stabilized the rift. He fell to his knees, shielding his eyes. The signal in his neural implant roared back to life, overloaded with sound and vision. For an instant, he saw beyond the rift, glimpses of colossal shapes moving in nebular storms, vast creatures of light and scale far older than the dragons themselves. The ancestors, Viserys whispered, his voice now filled with reverence. They hear us. And then, abruptly, the sky went silent. The rift sealed itself with a final pulse, sending a shockwave across the planet's magnetic field. Satellites blinked out one by one. Communication died. Power grids failed. Humanity, for the first time in centuries, was cut off from its own orbit. When the wind settled, Elias lay on the ground, his breath shallow, his skin tingling with residual energy. The dragons hovered above the now still clouds, their formation steady, deliberate. One by one, their eyes turned toward him again. You gave us a voice, Viserys said softly. Now the stars have heard it. And far beyond sight, something answered. A deep, distant roar rolled through the stratosphere, not thunder, but a reply. The following days blurred into a rhythm of heat, metal, and the haunting rhythm of dragon breath echoing through the canyon. Jalen had turned the old forge chamber into a workshop again, though its purpose was far from what it had once been. Where chains had been repaired, he now repaired circuits, where whips had been oiled, he now polished armor plating and living scales side by side. The dragons had begun to trust him, not in the way of soldiers to a commander, but in the way of wounded creatures sensing a kind hand after centuries of cruelty. Still, he could feel the pressure of what he was doing growing heavier with every spark that lit the air. He wasn't just fixing a system anymore, he was dismantling one. One evening, as the crimson sun sank into the jagged horizon, Vera entered the chamber, her bioluminescent veins glowing faintly beneath the translucent plates of her chest. You've changed the harmonic codes, she said quietly. The life engines, they no longer respond to command input. Jalen didn't look up from the console. They're not supposed to, he said. They'll answer to no one now. Not me, not the overseers, not you. Just themselves. Her wings trembled, their edges rippling with bioelectric shimmer. Then, they are free. Jalen finally raised his gaze, and for a long moment, they simply looked at each other, human and dragon, creator and creation. Freedom's not something you're given, he said. It's something you take. He had begun the reprogramming days ago, working through the dragon's genetic lattices embedded in the biocore. Each line of code was a centuries-old curse, tying them to obedience, to the will of the human empires that had bred them for war. He had found the fail-safes hidden deep in the sequences, the control strings woven into their very instincts. Now, one by one, he was breaking them. But the cost was growing, energy fluctuations pulsed through the caverns, shaking the ancient foundations. Some of the younger dragons had begun to scream at night, their systems in flux, as the new code rewrote the old. The air outside was different too. The storm that had once hung over the planet's upper atmosphere was shifting, growing luminous with unnatural light. Jalen noticed it during his late walks across the ridge, a shimmering aurora-like wave sweeping through the night, pulsing in rhythm with the dragon's heartbeats. The life engines were linked to the world's crust itself, deep geothermal conduits feeding the dragon's vital systems. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't just freeing them, it was waking the planet. On the fifth night, the overseers returned. Their ships entered orbit, black triangles blotting out the stars, each carrying the insignia of the genetic dominion. Jalen saw their descent through the fractured scanner array and knew there would be no hiding this time. They found us, he told Vera. She didn't flinch. Then they'll find something they can no longer control. The other dragons gathered outside the cavern mouth, their wings folding and unfolding in anticipation. For the first time in millennia, there was no fear in their movement. Only something primal. Jalen stood before the central control spire, his fingers resting on the activation plate. The biocore thrummed beneath his feet like the pulse of a sleeping god. The overseer's transmission came through the comm line, a cold voice, distant yet sharp. Human mechanic Jalen Orris. Cease all interference. The dragons are the property of the Dominion. You are ordered to surrender. He stared at the comm link, expression unreadable. You'll have to take them, he said. And you'll find out what they really are. With that, he pressed the activation plate. The world shuddered. Energy arcs leapt from the spire to the ceiling, cascading down like electric rain. The dragons roared, not in pain but in resonance, a sound so vast it shook the mountains. Chains buried for ages broke apart in showers of molten light as their life engines surged into autonomous operation. The overseer's ships began firing, plasma lances tearing through the atmosphere, but the beams dispersed before reaching the ground, refracted by the rising electromagnetic storm. The dragons rose into the air, their scales glowing with internal fire, their roars echoing through the planetary storms. Vera turned her gaze toward Jalen. You've done it, she said, voice trembling. You've made us alive again. He didn't answer. His eyes reflected the storm outside, the color of rebirth and destruction mingled into one. He knew what was coming next. Freedom always came with fire. The dawn that followed was unlike any other the planet had known. The sky, once pale and empty, burned with ribbons of molten light where plasma trails from fallen ships painted the horizon. The air was thick with the metallic scent of ozone, and the ground hummed beneath Jalen's boots as though the planet itself were alive and breathing. He stood at the edge of the canyon, looking down upon the ruins of the overseer fleet scattered across the plains. Smoke curled upward like the dying breath of an empire. Around him, the dragons hovered in the air, wings wide and shimmering with residual energy, their eyes reflecting the rising sun. For the first time in countless generations, they were no one's weapons. Vera descended beside him, her movements smooth, the metallic tendons of her wings clicking softly as they folded. It's over, she said, her voice still tinged with awe. They'll not return soon. Their command lattice is broken. Jalen nodded, though he could still feel the hum of the biocore resonating in the earth beneath them. Maybe not soon, he replied, but they'll come again. Empires always do. The question is whether the world will still bow when they arrive. He looked up at the sky, where, beyond the last wisps of smoke, the stars were returning, clear and cold. Now, he murmured, this place belongs to you. The dragons had begun to scatter, some taking to the high peaks, others flying toward the deep valleys where ancient nests had long been buried under dust and memory. Their movements were uncertain, like creatures relearning what it meant to live. Jalen watched them, feeling both pride and distance. His work had ended, but what he had created, what he had unleashed, was only beginning. Vera seemed to sense the weight in his silence. You're leaving, she said quietly. He didn't deny it. The biocore's stabilizing. It doesn't need me anymore. You don't need me. She lowered her head, the glow beneath her scales dimming. You gave us life, she said. You could share it. He smiled faintly. Life isn't something to share. It's something to fight for. You've got that chance now. He turned from her and began walking toward the ridge where his ship lay half buried in ash. The air was cold and sharp, the wind alive with the echoes of dragon cries. Every step felt like leaving behind a heartbeat of history. As he reached the ship, he paused. The control panel blinked faintly, a signal was trying to reach him, encoded and familiar. He opened the channel. The voice was cracked, distorted, but unmistakably human. Jalen Orris. This is the Free Terran Network. We intercepted your transmissions. We saw what you did. The Dominion is collapsing. We're forming a coalition, humans who refuse to rebuild the same chains. We could use you. He stood there for a long moment, the comm unit buzzing softly in his palm. Behind him, the sky was alive with the silhouettes of dragons rising into the clouds, their wings scattering light across the horizon. Freedom, he thought, was never quiet. He closed the channel and looked at the horizon, where dawn met the torn edge of night. I already started something, he whispered. Maybe that's enough. Then Vera's shadow passed over him, vast and brilliant, her wings stretching across the valley. Then go, she said, her voice echoing through the comm system, resonant and calm. But remember this, you did not fix our engines. You fixed our hearts. Wherever you go, the sky will remember you. He smiled, a tired, human smile, and stepped into the ship. The engines hummed to life, ancient but faithful. As he ascended, the ground fell away beneath him, ruins, mountains, and rivers glowing with new energy. Below, the dragons roared one last time, a thunderous chorus rolling through the atmosphere. It was not the sound of war, but of existence itself. When he broke through the upper atmosphere, the world below shimmered like a living jewel. The network of life engines he had awakened pulsed faintly through the planet's crust, spreading light like veins through stone. Somewhere deep within, he knew the dragons would build again, not as slaves, not as monsters, but as a people reborn. In the silence of orbit, Jalen gazed out at the stars. For the first time in years, he felt no anger, no grief, just an unfamiliar peace. The universe stretched before him, endless and waiting. Perhaps he would find another world to mend, another broken code to set free. Or perhaps he would simply drift, a mechanic among stars, leaving sparks of rebellion in his wake. Behind him, the planet exhaled one last pulse of light, as if bidding him farewell. He watched it fade into the dark, and then he was gone, one man, countless stars, and the echo of dragons singing their freedom to the cosmos.